Hey there, welcome to Dr. Pickleface, the place for crazy stories you won't forget. If you like big surprises, wild drama, and little sweet revenge, you're in the right spot. Subscribe and jump into tales that will make you gasp, laugh, and keep you watching for more. Fun characters, shocking twists, and endings that feel so good. That's Dr. Pickleface. Hit the bell and let's start the fun.
Oh God. Oh God.
The coffee mug exploded in Ray Talcott's hands like a grenade, ceramic shards mixing with blood as scalding liquid burned his palms. On the computer screen, frozen in digital amber, was the evidence that would destroy everything he'd built over 17 years of marriage. His wife Delia, naked and laughing, straddling Fire Marshal Bradley Kinlan in their basement rec room. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., exactly when Ray had been fixing Mrs. Henderson's broken furnace across town, covered in dust and sweat, thinking about surprising his family with takeout from their favorite Thai place. But the real gut punch wasn't the adultery. It was the browser tab still open beneath the photo. How to erase Ring camera footage permanently. They weren't just cheating, they were planning something that required covering their tracks. Ray's hands shook as he closed the laptop, ceramic fragments falling to the kitchen floor like broken promises. 23 years as an HVAC technician had taught him that the most dangerous fires start small, in hidden places, feeding on oxygen until they consume everything. This fire had been burning in his basement while he'd been upstairs, oblivious, making breakfast for the woman who was orchestrating his destruction. The front door clicked open. Delia's voice drifted through the house, honey-sweet and practiced. "Ray? I'm home. God, I missed you today." He looked at his bleeding hands, then at the shattered mug. In the reflection of spilled coffee on the granite countertop, Ray Talcott saw a dead man walking. But dead men, he realized, had nothing left to lose. "I missed you too," he called back, his voice steady as winter ice. "How was your day?" That night, as Delia slept beside him, the same bed where she'd whispered, "I love you," just hours after ducking another man. Ray stared at the ceiling and made a decision that would either save his family or damn them all. His 14-year-old daughter, Erin, had been acting strange for weeks, jumping at shadows, flinching when Bradley visited. His 17-year-old son, Noah, had started locking his bedroom door and refused to be alone with their family friend. Something was rotting in the Talcott house, and Ray could smell the decay beneath the surface of their perfect suburban life. At 3:17 a.m., Erin crept into his room like a ghost, her face pale in the hallway light. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Bradley said if I tell you what Mom's doing, he'll hurt Noah, but I can't. I can't keep this secret anymore." Ray sat up slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What secret, baby?" Aaron's next words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. "He said he's going to burn down our house with you inside it. And Mom said it would look like an accident." Bad HVAC work. The room went silent, except for the sound of Ray's world cracking apart. His wife wasn't just cheating on him. She was planning to murder him for insurance money, using his own profession as the weapon. But as Ray pulled his trembling daughter into his arms, feeling her tears soak through his t-shirt, something cold and calculating settled in his chest. Delia and Bradley thought they were playing chess while he played checkers. They had no idea they'd just declared war on a man who understood systems, who knew that every house had hidden spaces, every relationship had weak points, and every plan had flaws that could be exploited by someone patient enough to find them. The next morning, Ray kissed Delia goodbye like nothing had changed, watched her drive away in her silver Lexus to show houses to unsuspecting clients, and began planning the most complex job of his career. Not fixing something this time, destroying it, piece by methodical piece, until the truth burned bright enough to illuminate every shadow in his family's life. He had no idea that the game had already begun, or that his first move had been anticipated by players whose cruelty ran deeper than he'd ever imagined. Ray discovered the first piece of evidence on a Tuesday morning in October, when the Vermont maples were bleeding red against a steel-gray sky. He'd always been methodical. 23 years of HVAC work had taught him that rushed jobs killed people. So he approached his wife's betrayal like any other system failure. Diagnose the problem, trace the source, document everything. The family computer lived in the kitchen nook, accessible to everyone but monitored by no one. Ray had installed parental controls years ago, back when Noah was discovering the internet's darker corners. But he'd never thought to check his wife's browsing history. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of marriage, wasn't it? Now, as he scrolled through deleted browser data recovered with a simple software program Bobby had recommended, Ray realized that trust was just another word for willful blindness. The evidence painted a timeline that made his stomach turn. 3 months of deleted emails between Delia and Bradley discussing Ray problems and solutions that would benefit everyone. Credit card statements showing hotel charges during Ray's work trips. Text messages recovered from old backups, including one from Bradley that made Ray's blood freeze. The inspection is scheduled for next week. Make sure he's working late that night. But it was Noah who provided the smoking gun. Dad, I need to show you something, his 17-year-old said, approaching Ray's workbench in the garage where he'd been pretending to organize tools while actually planning the systematic destruction of his wife's life. Noah's face was grim, older than his years. I've been recording things for weeks now. He handed Ray a small digital recorder, the kind kids used for school projects. I hid it under the porch after I heard them talking about you. Listen to yesterday. Ray pressed play with trembling fingers. Through the static, he heard Bradley's voice, clear as a death sentence. The fire needs to look accidental. Old wiring, faulty installation. Ray's been in business long enough to have made mistakes. We just need to make sure he's inside when it happens. Delia's response felt like a knife between his ribs. What about the kids? They'll be at your mother's that weekend. You said you could arrange it. And afterward? Insurance pays out. We wait 6 months for propriety. Then we get married. Clean and simple. Ray's hands were shaking so hard he nearly dropped the recorder. His wife and her lover weren't just planning adultery. They were orchestrating murder. His murder. And they'd been discussing it like a weekend renovation project. There's more, Noah said quietly. He's been touching Erin. Not the worst thing, but enough to scare her. She told me she was afraid to tell you because he said he'd burn down the house if she talked. The garage walls seemed to close in around Ray. The woman he'd loved for 17 years, the mother of his children, was not only planning to kill him, but had allowed her lover to terrorize their daughter. The betrayal was so complete, so venomous, that Ray felt something fundamental break inside his chest. But with the breaking came clarity. Ray looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw a young man who'd been forced to become a protector while his father remained oblivious. Noah had been gathering evidence, shielding his sister, fighting battles that should never have been his responsibility. We're going to stop them, Ray said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. But we're going to do it right. Legal, documented, airtight. Noah's eyes widened. What do you mean? Ray stood up from his workbench, feeling pieces click into place like components in a perfectly balanced system. I mean, we're going to give them exactly what they want. We're going to let them think they're winning right up until the moment we destroy them. Over the next week, Ray began laying groundwork with the patience of a craftsman and the ruthlessness of a man with nothing left to lose. He opened new bank accounts, transferred assets into trusts, and hired Detective Molly Reiner, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in domestic investigation and had no love for dirty cops like Bradley. Your wife's been building a paper trail, Molly told him during their first meeting at a diner outside town. 3 complaints to the police about your erratic behavior, 2 visits to a family counselor where she expressed concern for her safety, and a consultation with a divorce attorney. She's creating a narrative. What kind of narrative? Unstable husband, history of anger issues, potential for violence. The kind of story that makes a house fire look like suicide instead of murder. Ray felt ice water in his veins. How long do I have? Based on the pattern, I'd say a month, maybe less. That night, Ray sat in his kitchen listening to his family's evening routine. Delia helping Erin with homework while Bradley watched football in the living room like he owned the place. The casual intimacy of their voices, the way Bradley called out, "Hey babe, bring me a beer," and Delia giggled like a teenager. It painted a picture of the life they planned to build on Ray's grave. He pulled out his phone and called his estranged brother, Bobby, a former army mechanic who'd spent the last decade fixing cars and nursing grudges against the world. I need help, Ray said without preamble. What kind of help? The kind that might get messy. Bobby was quiet for a long moment. When do you need me? Soon. And Bobby? Bring your tools. As Ray hung up, he heard Delia laughing at something Bradley had said. The sound that had once filled him with warmth now felt like fingernails on his coffin lid. But dead men, Ray reminded himself, had advantages that living men didn't. They could move through the world invisible, planning in shadows, striking from angles their enemies never saw coming. The war for his family's survival was about to begin. And Ray Talcott intended to win it, even if victory meant burning down everything he'd spent 20 years building. The courthouse in Rutland smelled like old paper and broken promises. Ray sat across from Lori Evans, a family law attorney whose reputation for ruthless efficiency had earned her enemies in every law firm within 50 miles. Her office was sparse, functional, no family photos, no personal touches, just law books and the accumulated weight of human misery. "Your evidence is compelling," Lori said, reviewing the thick folder Ray had assembled over the past 2 weeks. "But compelling isn't the same as conclusive. We need more." Ray had expected this. Good attorneys were like good HVAC technicians. They identified problems before they became disasters. What kind of more? The kind that puts them in handcuffs instead of just embarrassing them in family court? Lori leaned back in her chair, studying Ray with sharp eyes. "Your wife and her boyfriend aren't just planning adultery, Mr. Talcott. They're planning murder. That means we're playing by different rules." Over the next hour, Lori outlined a strategy that would have impressed Sun Tzu: controlled revelation of evidence, strategic legal filings, and careful documentation of every threat, every lie, every move Delia and Bradley made. The goal wasn't just to win custody of his children. It was to expose a conspiracy that reached into the fire department, the police, and God knew where else. "We'll start with an emergency protective order," Lori explained. "Based on your daughter's statement about inappropriate contact, that gets Bradley away from your house, legally. What about Delia? She's trickier. Right now, she hasn't technically done anything actionable. Planning to kill you isn't illegal until she takes concrete steps." Ray felt frustration building in his chest. "So we just wait for her to try?" "No, we make her take those steps on our timeline, in ways we can document." Lori's smile was sharp as winter. "Your wife thinks she's playing chess. We're going to teach her she's actually been playing checkers." That afternoon, Ray returned home to find his mother-in-law, Sylvia Kinlan, holding court in his kitchen like an occupying general. At 65, she was all sharp elbows and sharper tongue, a woman who'd spent decades perfecting the art of passive-aggressive warfare. "Raymond," she said, not bothering to look up from the casserole she was assembling. "Delia tells me you've been acting strange lately, paranoid." Ray poured himself coffee, using the mundane action to mask his racing pulse. Everything was about to accelerate, and Sylvia's presence meant Delia was already positioning her pieces for the endgame. "I've been working a lot," Ray said carefully. "A big commercial job downtown." Sylvia's tone suggested she didn't believe him. "You know, paranoia can be a sign of mental instability. Sometimes men your age, they start imagining things that aren't there." The kitchen felt suddenly small, oppressive. Through the window, Ray could see Bradley's truck in the driveway, the man himself nowhere visible. Probably in the basement again, Ray realized. Probably planning. "What kind of things?" Ray asked. Sylvia finally looked at him, her eyes cold as February. "Conspiracy theories, delusions about the people who love them most. It's very sad, really. Families torn apart by one person's inability to accept reality." Ray understood the message. The narrative was already being written. Unstable husband succumbs to paranoid delusions, becomes a danger to his family. The kind of story that made house fires and insurance claims seem tragically inevitable. "Where are the kids?" Ray asked. "Erin's at her friend Sarah's house for a sleepover. Noah's at basketball practice." Sylvia's smile was thin as a blade. "Delia thought it would be good for them to have some space while you work through whatever's troubling you." The house felt different with the children gone. Larger, emptier, more dangerous. Ray realized this was a test run, a rehearsal for the night they planned to make permanent. His family was being systematically removed from harm's way while he was isolated, made vulnerable. But isolation worked both ways. "I think I'll work late tonight," Ray said casually. "Got some quotes to finish up." "That's wonderful," Sylvia said. "Family time is so important." "I'm sure Delia and Bradley will enjoy having the evening to themselves." Ray almost smiled at the crude transparency of it. They weren't even trying to hide anymore, confident that their victim was too stupid or too trusting to see what was happening right in front of him. They had no idea that their victim had already died, killed by the discovery of that first photograph, and been replaced by something much more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and the patience to plan their destruction with the same methodical care he brought to every job. That night, Ray didn't go to his workshop. Instead, he drove to the abandoned warehouse where Bobby was waiting with equipment that wasn't available at Home Depot. His brother looked older than his 44 years, scarred by deployments and disappointments, but his hands were still steady and his loyalty absolute. "You sure about this?" Bobby asked, checking the small cameras and recording equipment laid out on a folding table. "They're planning to kill me, Bobby. Murder me in my sleep and make it look like an accident. Then why not just go to the cops?" Ray gestured toward the evidence files Detective Molly had helped him compile. "Because Bradley is the cops. Or close enough. Fire marshal, emergency services, good old boys network. Half the department probably owes him favors." Bobby nodded slowly. He'd seen enough corruption in the military to understand how institutions could be weaponized against individuals. "So, what's the play?" "We make them think they're winning, document everything. Let them hang themselves with their own rope." "And if something goes wrong?" Ray looked at his brother. Really looked at him. And saw the weight of shared history, childhood fights, and adult disappointments, the unbreakable bond between men who'd grown up in the same house with the same impossible father. "Oh, then you make sure my kids know the truth." Over the next 3 hours, they installed surveillance equipment throughout Ray's house. Tiny cameras and smoke detectors, audio recorders and heating vents, motion sensors that would alert Ray's phone if anyone entered his home while he was away. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was turning his own house into a crime scene before the crime had been committed. By midnight, Ray's home had been transformed into the most monitored location in Vermont. Every room, every conversation, every movement would be recorded and backed up to secure servers Detective Molly had arranged. When Delia and Bradley made their move, Ray would have evidence that would bury them both. He was almost looking forward to it. The emergency came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in November, when the first snow was already painting Rutland white, and the temperature had dropped to the kind of cold that made old pipes burst. Ray's phone screamed him awake. The Henderson furnace again, the same system he'd been nursing through its final winter for 3 years. Perfect timing, Ray thought as he dressed in the dark. Delia stirred beside him, murmuring something about work being too demanding, her voice thick with artificial sleep. She'd been waiting for this call, Ray realized. Probably orchestrated it. "Emergency call," he whispered, kissing her forehead with lips that tasted like lies. "Henderson's heat is out completely." "Be careful," Delia said, her eyes still closed. "Roads are getting icy." Ray left through the garage, noting that Bradley's truck was already parked 3 blocks away, where it would be invisible from the house, but close enough for quick access. The snow was falling harder now, the kind of weather that made accidents seem plausible and alibis unshakable. At the Henderson house, Ray worked with deliberate slowness, stretching a 2-hour job into 4, while Detective Molly monitored the surveillance feeds from his house in real time. They had a system. If anything happened, if anyone entered his home while he was away, she would call immediately. The call came at 4:23 a.m. "They're inside." Molly's voice was tense through the phone. Delia let him in through the back door. "They're in your bedroom." Ray's hands stilled on the furnace repair. "What are they doing?" "Setting up something. Bradley's got a toolkit, some kind of electrical equipment. They're working on your side of the bed near the outlet where you charge your phone." The plan crystallized in Ray's mind with terrible clarity. An electrical fire, starting in the wall behind his nightstand, spreading while he slept. By the time the smoke alarms went off, the blaze would be too established to escape. Another tragic accident, another case for Fire Marshal Bradley Kinlan to investigate with appropriate solemnity. "How long?" Ray asked. "They're moving fast. Maybe 15 minutes before they're done?" "Call Lori. Tell her it's happening. Start the emergency protocol." Ray finished the Henderson job in record time, his movements sharp with controlled fury. He'd spent weeks planning for this moment. But the reality of it, knowing his wife was in their bedroom, wiring his death, felt like swallowing molten metal. The drive home took 12 minutes through snow that was getting heavier by the hour. Ray parked 2 blocks away and approached his house on foot, using shadows and winter weather for cover. Through his bedroom window, he could see the warm glow of a lamp, 2 figures moving with practiced efficiency. His phone buzzed. A text from Delia. "Working late? Miss you in this cold bed. Drive safe. Love you." Ray stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something fundamental break inside his chest. She was texting him love messages while literally preparing his execution. The casual cruelty of it, the complete absence of human feeling, was more terrifying than the murder plot itself. He typed back, "Almost done. Home soon. Love you too." 20 minutes later, Ray entered his house through the front door, calling out like a husband returning from honest work. "I'm back. Anyone awake?" Delia appeared in the hallway wearing a robe and manufactured concern. How did it go? You look exhausted. Long night. I need coffee. In the kitchen, Ray went through the motions of domesticity while his mind cataloged evidence. The muddy footprints by the back door that weren't there when he'd left, the faint smell of electrical work in the air, the way Delia kept glancing toward the bedroom like she was expecting something. I think I'll grab a shower and try to get some sleep, Ray said, heading toward their bedroom. Maybe you should use the guest bathroom, Delia said quickly. I had trouble sleeping. Thought I smelled something electrical. Probably nothing, but... Ray paused, his hand on the bedroom doorframe. This was it, the moment of truth. If he went into that room and plugged in his phone as usual, he would die tonight. The fire would start in the walls, spread through old insulation, consume the house while he slept the sleep of the trusting. You're probably right, he said. I'll use the kids' bathroom. Relief flickered across Delia's face. Good idea. I love you, Ray. I love you too, he replied, the words turning to ash in his mouth. Ray spent the next hour in the guest room, staring at his phone and watching surveillance feeds that showed his wife lying awake in their bedroom, checking the clock every few minutes, waiting for the fire to start, waiting for her husband to die. At 6:15 a.m., when nothing had happened, Delia got up and went to check the wiring. Ray watched through hidden cameras as she discovered the unplugged phone charger, her face cycling through confusion, fear, and something approaching panic. She knew that he knew. The game had shifted to its final phase, and Ray Talcott was no longer playing defense. Delia's scream cut through the morning air like a fire alarm, raw and desperate and completely authentic. Ray found her in their bedroom, crouched beside their bed with her hands over her face, shoulders shaking with what looked like genuine terror. Oh God, Ray, thank God you didn't sleep in here last night, she sobbed, pointing at the electrical outlet near his side of the bed. I smelled something burning, and when I looked, the wiring's completely fried. If you'd plugged in your phone. The performance was flawless. Ray had to admire the commitment. Delia had clearly practiced this moment, perfected the right balance of relief and horror. She was playing the part of the loving wife who'd narrowly saved her husband's life, complete with tears that might have been real. Jesus, Ray said, crouching beside her. When did you notice the smell? Around 5:30. I couldn't sleep anyway. Kept thinking I heard something in the walls. Delia looked up at him with eyes that were masterpieces of manufactured concern. Ray, what if this had happened while you were sleeping? What if I hadn't woken up? What if, indeed? Ray touched her shoulder gently, playing his own part in this theater of lies. But you did wake up. You saved us both. We need to call someone, an electrician or the fire department. I'll handle it, Ray said. Let me get dressed first. In the bathroom, Ray studied his face in the mirror and was surprised to find he looked completely normal. Not like a man who'd just survived a murder attempt. Not like someone whose life had been permanently divided into before and after. Maybe that was the secret to survival, the ability to compartmentalize horror, to function while your world burned down around you. His phone buzzed, a text from Bradley. Heard there was some trouble at your place. Everything okay? Ray typed back. Electrical problem. Could have been bad, but Delia caught it in time. Thank God for wives, right? I'll swing by later to check on you both. Of course he would. Bradley needed to see the scene, to make sure his handiwork looked properly accidental. Ray almost smiled at the transparency of it. These people thought they were master manipulators, but they had all the subtlety of a house fire. Within an hour, Ray's home had become a crime scene disguised as a domestic emergency. Detective Molly arrived first, posing as a family friend who'd heard about the close call. Then came Bobby, playing the concerned brother. Finally, Bradley showed up in his official capacity as fire marshal, bringing equipment and expertise and an expression of professional concern that would have fooled anyone who didn't know better. Looks like old wiring finally gave out, Bradley said, examining the outlet with theatrical thoroughness. These houses, from the 70s, they weren't built for modern electrical loads. You're lucky your wife woke up when she did. Very lucky, Ray agreed, watching Bradley's face carefully. What would have happened if she hadn't? House fire, probably starting in the walls. By the time you smelled smoke, it would have been too late to get out safely. Bradley straightened up, meeting Ray's eyes with perfect composure. Could have killed you both. The casual way he said it, could have killed you both, while knowing he'd specifically designed the fire to kill only Ray, to spare Delia and make her a wealthy widow. The man wasn't just a murderer. He was a sadist who enjoyed discussing his victim's near-death experience. Good thing I was too tired to sleep in here, Ray said. Delia suggested I use the guest room. Something flickered in Bradley's eyes. Did she now? Said she was worried about keeping me awake, always thinking of others, my wife. Ray caught the look that passed between Delia and Bradley, a split second of communication that spoke volumes. They were already adjusting their strategy, planning their next move. The failed murder attempt had been a setback, not a defeat. I'll file a report, Bradley said. Recommend you have the whole system inspected before anyone sleeps in this room again. Absolutely. Safety first. After Bradley left, Ray spent the day playing the part of the grateful husband while surveillance equipment recorded every conversation, every gesture, every moment of the conspiracy that was eating his family alive. Delia was performing beautifully, checking on him constantly, bringing him coffee, expressing worry about what could have happened. But Ray could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was already planning the next attempt. That evening, as they sat down to dinner with the kids, Noah quiet and watchful, Aaron jumpy as a spooked cat, Sylvia made her entrance like an avenging angel descending from heaven. I heard about your close call, she said, settling into her chair with the air of someone preparing to hold court. These old houses, they're death traps. Maybe it's time to consider something newer, safer. The house is fine, Mom, Delia said. It was just old wiring. Sylvia's gaze fixed on Ray with laser intensity. You know, Raymond, stress can make people careless. Forget to turn things off. Leave dangerous situations unattended. When someone's mind is troubled, they can create hazards without even realizing it. Ray felt the familiar chill of recognition. This was the setup for the next narrative. Mentally unstable husband nearly burns down house through negligence. The groundwork for a competency hearing, maybe even involuntary commitment. I'm handling my stress just fine, Ray said carefully. Are you? Because Delia's mentioned you've been acting strange lately, paranoid, seeing threats that aren't there. The dinner table went silent except for the sound of Noah's fork scraping against his plate. Ray could feel his children watching, waiting to see how he would respond to this attack. What kind of threats? Ray asked. Sylvia smiled, the expression sharp as broken glass. The kind that exist only in the minds of people who can't accept reality, people who would rather believe in elaborate conspiracies than face the truth about their own failings. Ray set down his fork and looked directly at his mother-in-law. What truth would that be, Sylvia? That maybe the reason your family seems distant lately isn't because of some imaginary plot. Maybe it's because you've become someone they don't recognize, someone they're afraid of. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Ray could see exactly what this were doing, painting him as an unstable man whose paranoid delusions made him dangerous to his own family, setting up justification for whatever came next. But Ray had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and his response was ready. You're right, he said quietly. I have been acting strange lately. Suspicious. Paranoid, even. Delia's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the script she'd expected. The thing is, Ray continued, paranoia is only a mental illness if the things you're worried about aren't actually happening. But when your wife is planning to murder you for insurance money and her boyfriend is wiring electrical fires in your bedroom, well, that's just called paying attention. The silence that followed was absolute. Ray could hear his own heartbeat, could see the blood draining from Delia's face as she realized the game had changed completely. That's, Sylvia started. Exactly the kind of crazy talk you were expecting, Ray finished. The kind of thing an unstable man would say, except I have proof. Ray pulled out his phone and played 30 seconds of audio. Bradley's voice, clear as a church bell, discussing fire accelerants and insurance investigations. Delia's voice responding with cold calculation about timing and alibis. When the recording ended, Ray looked around the table at his family, his real family, and the parasites who'd been feeding on them. So yes, Sylvia, I have been acting strange lately, but not because I'm mentally ill, because I've been planning a war. Noah was staring at his father with something approaching awe. Aaron looked terrified, but hopeful, like someone who'd been trapped in darkness finally seeing light. And Delia looked like a woman who'd just realized she'd been playing chess with someone who'd been planning 10 moves ahead from the very beginning. The war for Ray Talcott's life had moved from shadow into daylight, and he intended to win it, even if victory meant destroying everything he'd once believed in. The courthouse steps were slick with November rain when Ray delivered the legal papers that would tear his life apart and rebuild it from ashes. Emergency protective orders, custody modifications, restraining orders, a blizzard of legal documents that landed on Delia and Bradley like a controlled demolition. Judge Howard Yates was exactly what Ray had hoped for, a methodical man in his 60s who'd spent 30 years learning to recognize performance from truth. His courtroom was wood-paneled and serious, a place where lies went to die under the weight of evidence. Mr. Talcott, Judge Yates said, reviewing the thick file Lori Evans had prepared. These are serious allegations. Conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, child endangerment. You understand the implications? Yes, Your Honor. And you have evidence to support these claims? Lori stood up, her briefcase loaded with recordings, photographs, financial documents, and testimony that would have made a prosecutor weep with joy. Extensive evidence, Your Honor, including audio recordings of the defendants discussing specific plans to murder Mr. Talcott and make it appear accidental. Ray watched Delia's face as the recordings played in open court. She sat beside her attorney, a sweating, nervous man who clearly wished he was anywhere else, and listened to her own voice planning her husband's death with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. The timing needs to be perfect, her recorded voice said through the courtroom speakers. Ray works late Thursdays. If the fire starts around midnight, he'll be asleep. Probably wouldn't wake up until it was too late. Bradley's voice followed. I can make it look like faulty wiring. Ray's been in business long enough to have made installation mistakes. Natural wear and tear, tragedy waiting to happen. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for the sound of Delia quietly sobbing. Ray felt no satisfaction in her tears. They were just another performance, another attempt to manipulate sympathy from people who might still believe in her innocence. Judge Yates stopped the recording. I've heard enough for now. Mr. Kinlan, you're hereby ordered to surrender your badge and any official equipment immediately. Both defendants are prohibited from any contact with Mr. Talcott or his minor children pending full investigation. Your Honor, Delia's attorney said, standing on shaking legs, my client maintains her innocence. These recordings could be fabricated, taken out of context. Save it for trial, Judge Yates said curtly. Emergency custody of the minor children is granted to Mr. Talcott. Mrs. Talcott, you will vacate the family home immediately. Ray felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking this time, but healing. For the first time in months, his children would be safe in their own home. Aaron wouldn't have to fear Bradley's presence. Noah wouldn't have to stand guard over his sister. But as they left the courtroom, Ray caught the look Bradley gave him across the hallway. Pure hatred, barely controlled violence. This wasn't over. Men like Bradley didn't surrender. They escalated. That night, Ray sat with his children in their kitchen for the first time in months, without feeling like prey animals waiting for predators to strike. Noah was asking questions about the legal process, trying to understand how the recordings had been obtained. Aaron was quieter, still processing the reality that the nightmare was truly ending. Where will Mom go? Aaron asked. Ray had been dreading this question. How do you explain to a 14-year-old that her mother had been planning to murder her father? How do you balance truth with the need to protect whatever innocence remained? She'll figure it out, Ray said. The important thing is that you're both safe now. Will she go to jail? I don't know, baby. Maybe. Aaron nodded slowly. Good. What she did, what they both did, it's not something people should get away with. Ray looked at his daughter with new eyes. Aaron had been forced to grow up too fast, to see ugliness that no child should witness. But she'd also developed a moral clarity that many adults never achieved. She understood justice in a way that surprised and humbled him. His phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. She saw too much. Stay out of it, HVAC boy. Ray's blood turned to ice water. He ran to Erin's room, finding her bed empty, window open, screen cut clean through. On her pillow was a note in Bradley's handwriting. Want to see her again? Drop the charges. You have 24 hours. The war had just become something much more dangerous. Ray called Bobby first, then Detective Molly, then Lori Evans. Within an hour, his house was filled with people who understood that the rules had changed completely. This wasn't about legal proceedings anymore. This was about survival. He's desperate, Molly said, studying the crime scene. Taking the girl was stupid. It turns this from conspiracy to kidnapping. Adds federal charges. He's not thinking clearly. Where would he take her? Ray asked, his voice barely controlled. Bobby was checking his equipment bag, face grim as winter. Man like that, he's got a bolt hole. Somewhere he can lay low, make demands. Problem is, desperate men do desperate things. Ray's phone rang, Bradley's voice artificially calm. You got my message? Where is she? Safe for now, but that depends entirely on your next move. What do you want? Public statement. Say you made it all up. Recordings were fake. Marriage was fine. Withdraw all charges. Get the restraining orders lifted. You do that, you get your daughter back. Ray felt rage building in his chest like pressure in a boiler. And if I don't, then Aaron learns what fire really feels like. The line went dead. Ray stood in his daughter's empty room, surrounded by pink walls and stuffed animals and the shattered remnants of childhood innocence, and felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. The methodical, careful man who'd been planning legal warfare was gone, replaced by something primal and unforgiving. Bobby, he said quietly, remember that equipment you brought back from Iraq? The stuff you're not supposed to have? His brother's eyes went hard. What are you thinking? Ray looked around at the people who'd gathered to help him. Detective Molly with her badge and her sense of justice, Lori Evans with her law books and her faith in the system, Bobby with his scars and his loyalty. Good people trying to do things the right way in a situation that had moved far beyond right and wrong. I'm thinking the law can't save Aaron now, but maybe we can. Over the next 6 hours, Ray Talcott transformed from victim to hunter. Using Detective Molly's contacts and Bobby's military expertise, they tracked Bradley to an abandoned hunting cabin 12 miles outside town. Thermal imaging showed 2 heat signatures inside, one large, one small, the smaller one stationary in what looked like a back room. He's got her tied up, Bobby said, studying the readings. Single entry point, good sight lines. Military training shows he's prepared for a siege. Then we don't give him one, Ray said. We give him something else. At 4:30 a.m., Ray called Bradley back. I'll do it. The statement, withdrawing charges, all of it. But I want proof she's alive first. Smart man. Hold on. Aaron's voice came through the phone, scared but strong. Dad, I'm okay. Don't... The line cut off. Proof enough? Bradley asked. Press conference at noon. Say it was all a misunderstanding. Marriage counseling fixed everything. You're back together. Do that, and tonight, you get your little girl back. How do I know you won't kill her anyway? Because then I'd have nothing to trade. Right now, she's my insurance policy. After you clear my name, she becomes a liability I don't need. Ray almost believed him. Almost. But men who planned murders for insurance money weren't known for keeping their word. Noon, Ray agreed. But Bradley, if anything happens to her before then, yeah, threats from the HVAC guy. I'm terrified. At 11:45 a.m., Ray stood in front of the courthouse where he'd destroyed his wife's life just days earlier, facing a crowd of reporters and cameras. The statement he was about to make would free 2 would-be murderers and paint him as a delusional husband who'd fabricated evidence against his innocent family. But that was okay, because while everyone was watching Ray Talcott humiliate himself on live television, Bobby and Detective Molly were moving through the woods around Bradley's hideout like ghosts with badges and military training. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray began, his voice steady as granite, I called this press conference to make an important correction regarding recent allegations against my wife and Fire Marshal Bradley Kinlan. In the crowd, he could see Delia standing next to her lawyer, barely suppressing a smile of triumph. She thought she'd won. They all thought Ray Talcott had been broken, forced to surrender everything to save his daughter. They had no idea they were watching the final act of a performance that had been 3 months in the making. I want to state clearly and publicly that the recordings I presented in court were taken out of context. My wife Delia and I have been working through our marital difficulties in counseling, and some private conversations were misinterpreted by a man under tremendous stress. Ray's phone vibrated once, the signal from Bobby. Aaron was safe. Fire Marshal Kinlan has been nothing but supportive of our family during this difficult time, and any suggestion that he was involved in wrongdoing is completely false. I apologize publicly for any damage these false allegations may have caused to his reputation and career. Second vibration. Package secured. Time to go. Ray looked directly into the nearest camera. However, there is one more thing the public should know about this situation. While I've been standing here clearing these good people's names, federal agents have been arresting Bradley Kinlan for kidnapping my 14-year-old daughter. The crowd erupted in chaos. Delia's face went white as paper. Ray smiled for the first time in months. You see, Mr. Kinlan was so confident that he'd broken me, that I'd do anything to get Aaron back. He forgot that kidnapping is a federal crime. And federal agents don't much care about small-town politics or who owes favors to whom. Detective Molly appeared beside him as reporters shouted questions and camera flashes exploded like lightning. It's done, she said quietly. He's in custody, Aaron's safe, and we found enough evidence in that cabin to put him away for life. Ray nodded, feeling exhaustion crash over him like a wave. The war was over. His family was safe. The monsters who'd tried to destroy them were finally caged. But as he looked at Delia's face across the crowd, confusion giving way to understanding giving way to hatred, Ray realized the story wasn't quite finished. Some fires, once lit, burned until there was nothing left to consume. 3 weeks after Bradley's arrest, Ray sat in his lawyer's office listening to Lori Evans explain why his wife would probably never see the inside of a prison cell. The problem is proving intent, Lori said, her voice tight with frustration. We have Bradley on kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder. He's going away forever. But Delia's lawyers are claiming she was coerced, that she was as much a victim as you were. Ray stared out the window at downtown Rutland, watching ordinary people live ordinary lives, unmarked by betrayal and attempted murder. She helped plan my death, Lori. We have it on tape. We have her voice on tape discussing Bradley's plan. Her lawyers say she was afraid to refuse him, that he threatened her and the children. It's a credible defense. Credible to people who didn't live with her for 17 years. Lori leaned forward, her expression serious. Ray, I need you to understand something. Delia is going to walk away from this with minimal consequences. Probably probation, maybe community service. The divorce will be ugly, but she'll get some assets, possibly even limited visitation with the kids. Ray felt familiar ice water in his veins. After everything, the recordings, the evidence, the kidnapping, Delia would escape justice because she was smart enough to let Bradley do the actual dirty work. There's something else, Lori continued. Something we found in Bradley's cabin that complicates things. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs that made Ray's stomach turn. Images of Erin, taken without her knowledge over several months. Pictures of her at school, at home, getting dressed in her bedroom. He was stalking her, Ray said, his voice barely controlled. For months, and Delia knew. Ray looked up sharply. What? We found text messages between them discussing Bradley's special interest in Erin. Delia wasn't just tolerating it, she was facilitating it. Making sure Erin was alone with him, dismissing the girl's complaints about inappropriate touching. The folder felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Ray had thought the betrayal was complete, but there were apparently depths of evil he'd never imagined. His wife hadn't just been planning his murder, she'd been serving up their daughter to a predator. This changes things, Lori said. Child endangerment, facilitating sexual offend of a minor. Even if we can't prove she wanted you dead, we can prove she knew what Bradley was doing to Erin and allowed it to continue. Ray closed the folder, feeling something break inside his chest that he hadn't known was still whole. How long? Based on the timestamps on the photos, at least 6 months, maybe longer. 6 months. While Ray had been working late, fixing furnaces and supporting his family, his wife had been enabling a predator's access to their daughter. Every sleepover Erin had been sent to, every time she'd been left alone with Bradley, every moment of terror his daughter had endured. Delia had orchestrated it all. That night, Ray sat with Erin in their kitchen, trying to find words for truths that no father should have to speak. She looked older than her 14 years, worn down by secrets that had been eating her alive for months. The police want to talk to you again, Ray said gently, about Bradley, about what he did. Erin nodded, not meeting his eyes. Will I have to see him? No, baby, never again. He's going to prison for a very long time. What about Mom? This was the question Ray had been dreading. How do you explain to a child that her mother had knowingly handed her over to a monster? How do you destroy whatever innocence remained while still preserving some hope for the future? Mom made some very bad choices, Ray said carefully. Choices that hurt you, hurt our whole family. She's going to face consequences for those choices. She knew, Erin said quietly, about what Bradley was doing. She knew and she didn't stop it. Ray felt his heart breaking. Yes, she knew. Why? It was the simplest question and the most impossible to answer. Why does a mother sacrifice her child's safety for her own desires? Why does someone choose evil when good is just as easy? I don't know, baby. I don't think there is a why that would make sense to people like us. Erin was quiet for a long time, picking at the edge of her placemat. Finally, she looked up at her father with eyes that had seen too much, but still held hope. I'm glad you found out, she said. I'm glad you stopped them. Ray pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, steady and strong and alive. They'd survived. Damaged, scarred, but alive, and together and free from the people who'd tried to destroy them. But survival, Ray was learning, was just the beginning. The real work, rebuilding, healing, learning to trust again, that would take years. 3 months later, at Delia's sentencing hearing, Ray watched his wife stand before Judge Yates and plead for mercy she'd never shown her own family. She was dressed conservatively, hair pulled back, makeup minimal, the picture of a remorseful woman who'd made mistakes but deserved compassion. "Your Honor," she said, her voice breaking at precisely the right moments. "I know I made terrible choices. I was scared, confused, manipulated by a man who threatened my family. I never wanted anyone to get hurt." Ray listened to the performance with something approaching admiration. Even facing prison time, even with the evidence stacked against her, Delia was still playing the victim card with Oscar-worthy conviction. Judge Yates wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Talcott," he said, his voice cutting through her manufactured tears, "I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. The court finds that you were not a victim of coercion, but an active participant in a conspiracy that endangered your husband's life and enabled the sexual offend of your minor daughter." Delia's face went white. Her lawyer shifted nervously in his chair. "You facilitated Mr. Kinlan's access to your daughter knowing of his inappropriate interest in her. You participated in planning your husband's murder for financial gain." These are not the actions of a frightened woman. They are the actions of someone who valued money and personal gratification above the safety of her own family. Ray felt satisfaction spread through his chest like warm honey. Finally, someone in authority was seeing through Delia's lies to the truth underneath. "Therefore," Judge Yates continued, "I sentence you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are prohibited from any contact with the minor children except as supervised by the Department of Children and Families, and those visits are contingent upon completion of court-ordered psychological evaluation and treatment." 8 years. Ray watched his wife's face crumble as the reality hit her. By the time she got out, Aaron would be 22, Noah would be 25. She would miss their graduations, their first jobs, their weddings. The children she'd sacrificed for money and lust would be adults with lives she'd played no part in building. As bailiffs led Delia away in handcuffs, she looked back at Ray one last time. No performance now, no manufactured emotion, just pure hatred, undiluted by pretense. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. Ray smiled and mouthed back, "Yes, it is." But as he left the courthouse with his children, Ray realized that Delia was both wrong and right. The legal battle was over, the immediate threats neutralized. But the deeper work, helping his family heal from betrayal that ran bone deep, learning to trust again, building something good from the ashes of what they'd lost. That work was just beginning. Some fires destroyed everything in their path. Others cleared the ground for new growth. Ray Talcott intended to make sure his family's story was the second kind. 2 years after the courthouse steps where Ray had played his final card, he stood in the kitchen of the same house where it all began, watching Noah make breakfast for his sister before school. The house felt different now. Lighter somehow, as if the removal of toxic people had improved the very air quality. Erin was laughing at something on her phone, the sound pure and unconscious, in a way that had taken months to return. She'd started therapy immediately after the trial, working through trauma with a specialist who understood that some damage required professional repair. The nightmares had stopped. The flinching at unexpected sounds had faded. She was 17 now, applying to colleges, planning a future that looked nothing like the prison her mother and Bradley had been constructing around her. Noah had deferred college for a year, claiming he wanted to help with the family business. But Ray knew the real reason. His son was afraid to leave them alone. The protective instincts that had developed during the crisis hadn't faded, and probably never would. Some responsibilities, once accepted, become part of who you are. "Dad," Erin said, looking up from her phone, "there's something you should know." Ray felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the hypervigilance that trauma leaves behind. "What is it?" "Mom's getting out early. Good behavior, overcrowding, something like that. Her lawyer called yesterday. 6 years instead of 8. Ray had expected this. Prison sentences were suggestions more than promises, especially for first-time offenders who played the system correctly. "When?" he asked. "Next month." Noah stopped what he was doing, his face hardening in ways that reminded Ray uncomfortably of himself during the worst days of the war. "She can't contact us, right? The restraining order is still active?" Until Erin turns 18, Ray confirmed. And even then, she can't come near the house. But they all knew restraining orders were just pieces of paper. If Delia wanted to make trouble, if she wanted revenge for the life Ray had taken from her, legal documents wouldn't stop her. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Ray sat in his workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade, and thought about the man he'd become. The methodical HVAC technician who'd discovered his wife's betrayal had been transformed by necessity into something harder, more calculating. He'd learned to think like his enemies, to plan like a general, to strike like a predator when cornered. The question was, could he go back to being the man he'd been before? Did he want to? His phone buzzed. Text message from unknown number. Heard you've been living well in my house, sleeping in my bed. That must end soon. Ray stared at the message for a long moment, feeling old familiar ice water in his veins. Delia wasn't even out of prison yet, but she was already making threats, already planning her return to their lives. Some people, Ray realized, never learned. Some fires never went out. They just smoldered underground, waiting for fresh oxygen to reignite. He deleted the message and opened his laptop, fingers moving over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. If Delia wanted to restart the war, if she thought 2 years in minimum security had somehow changed the fundamental equation between them, she was about to learn otherwise. Ray Talcott had spent 2 years healing his family and rebuilding their lives, but he hadn't forgotten the lessons that had saved them the first time. Patience, planning, and the understanding that sometimes good people had to do terrible things to protect what mattered most. The difference was, this time he wouldn't wait for the first move. This time he would be ready from the moment she stepped out of those prison gates. Ray pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Detective Molly's number, then Bobby's, then Lori Evans. The team that had saved his family once was still intact, still loyal, still capable of doing what needed to be done. Molly? He said when she answered. It's Ray. We need to talk. Delia's getting out early, and I think she's planning something. What do you need? Ray looked around his workshop, at the tools he'd used to build a life and the same tools he'd used to destroy his enemies when they threatened everything he loved. Everything we did before, he said, but this time, we finish it permanently. Through the window, Ray could see his children's bedroom lights still on, could imagine them talking quietly about their future, making plans that assumed they would be safe to pursue their dreams. They'd survived one war already. They shouldn't have to fight another. But if war was what Delia wanted, war was what she would get. And this time, Ray Talcott intended to make sure it ended with only one side left standing. Some fires burned until there was nothing left to consume. Others were extinguished by people who understood that the only way to stop a blaze was to remove its fuel completely. Ray opened a new document on his laptop and began typing. Contingency Plan, Phase 2. If Delia thought 2 years in prison had somehow evened the score between them, if she thought he'd gone soft while she'd been away, she was about to discover that the man who'd destroyed her life once was still very much alive. And this time, he wouldn't stop until the threat was eliminated permanently. The war for his family's future was about to begin again, but this time, Ray Talcott intended to make sure it was the last war they'd ever have to fight.